morning, and welcome to Morning Movie News, where today we're going to have Morning Movie News Express. And that's because I got off to a bit of a late start today, but wanted to make sure that an episode went up regardless. Not only because we have a lot to discuss, but it's Friday, and I wanted to make sure there was something fresh for the entire weekend. Now, why did I get a late start? Well, it's been a whirlwind week, thanks almost exclusively to Fox and their Marvel properties. Not only did they release the Deadpool trailer and the very controversial Fantastic Four movie, it'll be interesting to see how it fares at the box office this weekend, but they're also making headlines about future initiatives, both a movie and a potential TV show. So we're going to discuss that today, and then also two very controversial stories for the rest of the episode that a lot of people are talking about. I'm getting a lot of tweets about both, so I definitely wanted to discuss that as we went into the weekend. So the first story is about that Gambit movie, which is now moving forward full steam ahead because Channing Tatum is officially signed on. I do think it's surprising that Fox would have gotten so far along with the movie and approaching production without having Channing Tatum sign on the dotted line, that they would even have him acquire a director and do a lot of publicity for the film, like going to Comic-Con. I'd be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't lift a finger until you sign on for this movie officially. But, you know, apparently maybe that worked in Channing Tatum's favor because he really had Fox in a difficult position negotiation-wise. But anyway, whatever the deal was, they reached one, and they're now looking to cast the female lead. Now, I think we're all very curious to who the female characters in this movie will be because Gambit, of course, has quite the reputation with the ladies. Now, Rogue, he has said, will be in the film, and I think that many of us were maybe, you know, I had wanted Anna Paquin to continue with the role and prove herself in it, but I was so disappointed with her performance in the Rogue cut for X-Men Days of Future Past that I'm really kind of ready for someone else to tackle it. But I don't think that's going to be the case because there's no discussion about recasting Rogue, and they're really instead focusing on casting the role of Belladonna, the Juliet to Gambit's Romeo, in terms of the Assassin's Guild versus the Thieves Guild. So this seems to be, I don't know if it'll be a Gambit origin story, but it might very well be Gambit meets the X-Men story. Now, if you're a big Gambit fan, as I am, you're very aware of Gambit's past and, growing up in New Orleans and the whole situation there with this Thieves and Assassins Guild. And I think that a Thieves and Assassins Guild story, where you pit those two against each other, sounds pretty awesome. So I can see why Fox is so confident in a standalone Gambit movie and why Channing Tatum is so confident in one. He's like, it's like a dance-off, but with weapons. And I'm like, that does sound great, Channing Tatum. I can't wait. So the role they're casting is, the child of the head of the Assassin's Guild, a girl, and so they're Remy and Belladonna are betrothed, and they're supposed to get married and unite the two warring sides, right? And of course, as in every Romeo and Juliet story, it never quite goes the way as planned. It can't go that well because, of course, Gambit is going to fall in love eventually with Rogue, or at least have, that's going to be his primary lady love. But it's a very good role, and especially being the head of an Assassin's Guild, or, one of the chief members of its royal family, I think is a really, delicious role for anyone, actor or actress. So who are they considering? And we'll get back to Rogue momentarily. But they're considering Rebecca Ferguson, and so it was very nice to see her already on Hollywood's shortlists when it comes to blockbuster female roles. However, like many of you, I feel she can do better than being Channing Tatum's love interest. She's actually a couple of years younger than Channing Tatum, but for some reason, I think because she carries herself in a very sophisticated manner. I mean, she is an actress, so I'm sure she can change it up. But she seems a little older than Channing Tatum to me. She doesn't seem like a great match with him. I still prefer her as Captain Marvel, or actually, the more I think about it, Selena Kyle, Catwoman. I think that's a perfect fit for her opposite Ben Affleck. I think that I'm glad that she's testing for it, and I guess if she tested, she'd have to accept the role if it was offered to her, but I just really think that Rebecca Ferguson would be not particularly well used there, and would be, I think she can do better, not only in terms of the property she's attached to, but one that could further her career more. Although I can see why they want her, someone who's a major player in the Assassin's Guild would have lots of cool action sequences, and she certainly proved that she can pull those off. But again, not my choice, although I'm glad that she, is already being thought of for roles like this. I would much rather see Seydoux take on the role. She, of course, is a very famous French actress from Blue is the Warmest Color. She's in the upcoming Spectre film. And she also was in that Beauty and the Beast that came out about a year or so ago, the live-action version from France that was on a lot of our radars, but never really got that international release, unfortunately, so we couldn't see it. But anyway, I think she's a much better choice. I think that she seems like she's at the right level in terms of status to be a female lead in a Channing Tatum movie. I mean, we don't know if it's going to be a big hit yet, so I don't think that Rebecca Ferguson needs to take that kind of risk. I think she might have already graduated out of this level, but I think that Léa Seydoux is perfect. And also she looks a lot like the character, as drawn in the comics, so I would love to see her in the role. Then there is another actress who tested for it, the blonde from Mad Max Fury Road in The Harem, and I don't know, I mean, I think she seems too young. I feel like Goldilocks here, in terms of who's the right match for Channing Tatum, and also, she's an actress as well, I'm assuming, so, she could probably change it up, but I thought she was the least likable of all of Morton Joe's wives in Mad Max Fury Road, although Belladonna is supposed to not be, particularly well liked, because she ends up being Gambit's enemy. But anyway, of those three, that's who I'd like to see cast, but the movie seems to be shaping up pretty well, and the fact that Belladonna is the female lead, I think, is very promising. Now, as for Rogue, I think that, Channing Tatum said, I'm already calling him Gambit. I think he's very well cast, and I've said that before, but I still feel that way. But Channing Tatum said Rogue will appear in the film. I don't know how big a role that she'll have, but I'm more interested in how she's portrayed than who portrays her. And it seems like Anna Paquin most likely will come back, and they're going to continue to support her in that role. And Anna Paquin doesn't have much to do, so why not? But I would really like to see her up her power set, because I can't really see any other reason for Gambit to waste his time with her. I can't see Gambit being attracted to the scared little, girl child, I guess woman child is the right term, right? It's so rarely used because it's just such a rare thing to see. Not that women don't have their problems, but that's, rarely one of them. But, a woman child, I can't see Gambit being drawn to that. I think he likes the very powerful but tortured soul that Rogue, of course, becomes when she absorbs Captain Marvel's powers. That would be fun, for a crossover, a forced crossover. That she just, bursts into an MCU movie and takes Captain Marvel's powers and runs back to the Fox, Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'd be like, how rogue-like. But so I think that Anna Paquin, but if I really don't want her to see her in this movie if she's going to continue to portray the character as she has to date. I think that would be. No, nobody's interested in that, and I would like to see the Gambit movie be, a fresh start instead of, already being getting off on the wrong foot with including that version of Rogue. So I'm curious, what do you think? How is this movie shaping up? Who do you think would make a good female lead opposite Channing Tatum in that role? And Gambit fans, how do you like the way this movie is taking shape? All right, so that's the first story of the day. I'm right on schedule for a regular length episode. All right, so the next one is with Fox is that they're doing a TV series. They want to do a TV series with the X-Men. And they're in negotiations with Marvel right now to get Marvel's approval, because apparently even though Fox has the film rights to the X-Men, Marvel has to sign off on a television show. And at the recent, there's been a lot of TV press the last couple of weeks because they're having the Television Critics Association tour, so they have panels with all the networks and all the big shows. And so Fox said, "Oh yes, the X-Men TV series. We're close. We're very close." But I wouldn't be surprised if they're not as close as they think they are, because Marvel, of course, is very invested in the TV space, not only with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Carter, but of course with their Netflix initiative. And then, of course, DC is very heavily involved in the TV industry with their CW shows, which are expanding exponentially. And this obviously, all this success is very likely why Fox wants to get into the space as well. But I think you're getting to a tipping point of oversaturation. Especially since the Fox network already has some DC shows there as well, like Gotham. So if I were Marvel, I'd be like, man, I'm going to create even more competition for myself. And either you're going to have a good show, which pulls viewers potentially away from mine, or you'll have a bad show, which potentially turns viewers off from comic book shows in general. So I would be very surprised if Marvel actually does sign off on this deal, and maybe perhaps Fox is using the press again to its advantage and trying to pressure Marvel into saying yes, because they're going to be like, if you don't say yes, we're going to say that the reason we don't have an X-Men TV show is because you wouldn't let us. However, does anyone really want an X-Men TV show? I think it would just basically be Heroes, and while Heroes was very popular for a time, it's coming back. It had budgetary constraints, and I just don't know if people want to see the X-Men brand operate at that level. I personally have no desire for an X-Men TV show, but we'll see what happens. All right, so that's the second story of the day. I made up a little time. Then the next one, this is a very serious issue. This is the Stonewall trailer. Now this debuted earlier this week. I've seen a lot of people start to write me about it because people are upset about the fact that it's been whitewashed and some are saying gender washed. And so what's the complaint? Well, basically they made a young white gay man from the middle of the country who's not transgender, the lead, right? So he leaves his supposedly idyllic surroundings, which for him are not hospitable because of all the bigotry against gays at that time period in particular, although obviously still a problem for some today, and goes to the big city, New York City, where he finds a utopia, although that utopia even has to find itself operating in the shadows. And this, of course, leads to the Stonewall situation. So it's like, it's a typical thing that Hollywood likes to do, historical events seen through a fictional character's eyes. But anyway, a lot of people in the LGBT community are quite upset that there were really compelling historical figures that were involved in the Stonewall situation that are not picked to be the lead, particularly and particularly when the leaders of that movement were not only not white but were transgender, like a Caitlyn Jenner situation. So they're like, why don't you just tell those people's story and have them be the protagonists of your movie? And this leads to what was discussed on Movie Minute yesterday, and that's that study where it was said that 70% of all movie characters are straight white men. And one of the defenses the Hollywood executives have used against that study, and this a defense they use all the time, is that Hollywood is a business. We have to protect our bottom line. We have to do what people want to see. But I think it's becoming quite clear that the Hollywood executives' idea of what people want to see is antiquated. I'm sure that there was, of course, obviously a time when nobody would go and see a movie with a non-white male. They wouldn't see a movie that didn't have a straight white male lead. I totally support that, and that was for a very long time the case. However, that is clearly not the case anymore. I mean, look at the movies that are coming out this year, and the television show Transparent that's already on the air. Caitlyn Jenner is, more famous than Bruce Jenner has been for decades, and is a lightning rod and a face for that transgender movement. Also, we have some Oscar contenders coming out this year. You have the Danish Girl with Eddie Redmayne playing one of the very first transgender patients. And you also have one with Elle Fanning playing a young woman who wants to transgender into a boy. So I think clearly you have a demand for this. It's something that people are interested in, and it's a community that wants to be represented, and people are eager to see it represented. But even beyond what people want to see, I think there's a responsibility to portray history accurately. And I think that considering the horrible personal toll that was put upon these people who actually orchestrated Stonewall. For instance, one died, their body was found in the river, and, the police ruled her death a suicide, obviously not homicide, a suicide, but all of her friends said she wasn't suicidal. So, it's for someone to actually die for who they were and what they believed in, and then be like just a side character in their own movie, I think is pretty insulting. I mean, if you're going to make a movie about Stonewall, make a movie about Stonewall. But, it's unfortunate because Roland Emmerich himself, a gay individual, a very prolific director in Hollywood, who's wanted to try and, raise the profile of gay characters in movies. He wants to add, let's see if he actually got to do it, a gay character in Independence Day 4, Independence Day, the sequel. I put the 4 in there because it came out for 4th of July. It's always associated with that. But as I've reported before, he wanted to have a gay character in the movie who wasn't there just for comedic relief or to be the gay guy. He just wanted a character who was one of the, people who helped save the earth, who just happened to be gay. And I think that's really progressive, and I hope that he was able to pull that off. So it's a shame to see someone who is trying to be so proactive, find themselves in such a horrible negative situation PR-wise. Maybe this is what he had to do to get the movie made, but I really honestly believe that if people are interested in a Stonewall movie, they're interested in an accurate Stonewall movie. And what's the point of seeing a Stonewall movie if you're not going to get the right message in the actual story that happened? So I think the bottom line here is that Hollywood executives are out of touch with what people want to see and who's going to the movies. And I think that also, I think that we've discussed time and time again, Hollywood has also a responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. Or I guess in this case, with such a large audience comes great responsibility. If you're going to tell historical stories, they need to be really close to historically accurate. I think it's really crucial to make sure that you teach history correctly, because so often that's where people do get their history from. And I know that Hollywood might be like, well, I never said that you should, use my my movies or my product as a teaching tool, but you know what? People do. It's a de facto situation, and you just, you have to be responsible. So anyway, I'm curious how you guys feel about it, but clearly I think Stonewall is a non-starter. It's just not going to get the support it needs from the LGBT community to be anything of a real contender. I mean, at this point, I wouldn't even bother to release it. I think it's just really dead in the water. So anyway, those are the 3 stories of the day. Now on to the viewer, not a viewer question, but it's something I got tweeted about a lot. And also it goes into another question I get a lot, so that's one of the reasons I wanted to discuss it today. And that's the situation with Josh Trank. He tweeted last night, he sent out a tweet, talking about how he had an original cut of this film a year ago that he feels would have gotten much better reviews, but you'll never see it, and that's just reality, he says. That's just the way things work. But he quickly deleted it, but not before a number of people saw it and got a screen grab, and it's actually being covered by the trades this morning. So, it wasn't worth deleting. He should have stood by it because, once it's out there, it's out there. He didn't delete it fast enough. But anyway, I'm curious to how you feel about whether or not he should have tweeted. There's a real divide into how people are reacting to this, with some saying, oh man, if your career wasn't dead already, the fact that you turned down your studio, man, you're never going to work again. But then there are other people who are like, well, his movie was butchered, his name is mud, and he already isn't going to ever work again, so he really should defend himself. I don't really know if Twitter is the best place to defend oneself. I think I would tell him to go on some kind of talk show or do maybe an editorial for a magazine. I think there are lots of magazines that would be interested in this story. Do a tell-all with Vanity Fair, and Vanity Fair, of course, is a very reputable publication. And they would love a juicy story like that. I think that would have been the better way to go. But the reason I wanted to bring it up, not only to ask you what you think of what Josh Trank did by tweeting that, but I also wanted to point out, a lot of times people say, I get the question occasionally, like, well, why do you focus so much on the business of movies, right? Aren't movies an art? And at the end of the day, doesn't it just matter whether or not it's a quality piece of entertainment? And the thing is that I think that the Josh Trank situation is just a perfect example of how you have to have both abilities. You have to be a great artist, and you have to be a great business person. And I have to say, if you have to pick one of the two, being a better business person is more important, because Hollywood is a business. And Josh Trank, clearly, as I think many people can see from seeing Fantastic Four, has talent. I think that there are some really great ideas in there, which I've put up a lot of videos discussing it. I've defended his work on the film quite a bit, and I feel it deserves to be defended. But I think what's also clear, and I think we have to be honest about, what Josh Trank has to be honest about, is that the man just has horrible business etiquette. He just does not know what he's doing professionally. And so it just goes to show that that's what torpedoed his career. Nobody cares that he has good ideas. Nobody cares that, there are some things that he introduced here that were really, really unique and fantastic. At the end of the day, this man will probably never work again, or at least won't work for quite some time, because he wasn't able to navigate the situation from a business perspective. He wasn't able to make it work. Same with Edgar Wright. Edgar Wright couldn't make it work with Kevin Feige, and now he is having a problem in the business. So I think that it's really important to understand that Hollywood is a business, and that is, while art of course is important, it's a business of art, at the end of the day, you have to be able to do the dance. You have to be able to navigate the business side of the industry. And if you can't, you're going to have a really hard time working. You can work in a much smaller space, and maybe that's what happened to Josh Trank. Maybe he was never meant to work at such a large scale. But at the same time, I think, therefore, that talent needs to, acknowledge to themselves and admit to themselves that they're just never going to operate at that kind of level that gets those kind of paychecks and that kind of audience. So I just really wanted to point that out, and I think, again, it's a perfect example of why it's so important for us to be aware of the business aspects, because that's what dictates what movies get made and who works. No, I mean, of course, their talent comes into play, but not so much later. For instance, I also got another question about Miles Teller, and if he's so unlikable, why does he work? Well, the answer to that is he might not work for much longer if he's so unlikable, because I've heard stories about other actors. For instance, I've heard quite a few stories about Ryan Gosling being incredibly unlikable and difficult to work with, and you see that Ryan Gosling doesn't really work anymore, does he? So clearly, how you conduct yourself in meetings and on set, and whether or not you're reliable, and if you handle yourself at the press well, are all very important factors. And even when you're incredibly talented, like Josh Trank, Miles Teller, and Ryan Gosling are, it's not enough if you don't have the business savvy as well. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. It's not any shorter than usual, so I hope you enjoyed this non-express episode, and I look forward to discussing these stories with you down below. Thanks so much. Bye.